Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Sosnowski from TRC Market Research, and thank you very much for listening today. Mobile market research is a pretty hot topic these days, but for the majority of practitioners, I think it's still largely theoretical, something they hear about but haven't necessarily done. One of the things they hear a lot about is very real. It's that mobile does provide us or present some constraints that we have to deal with, in terms of how much information we can share with people, how many questions, things like that. So it's a very real challenge, this idea that we need to perhaps do more with less in the realm of mobile market research. Today I want to particularly focus on quantitative research. There's lots of great things going on in the field of kind of mobile qualitative and ethnography, and it really takes advantage of the platform really well. On the quantitative side of things, there's conventional wisdom forming about what the constraints of mobile mean for quantitative, fewer questions, etc., simpler questions. But, from my perspective, I want to think about how can we as researchers deliver high-value quantitative work, take advantage of the mobile platform, and respect the constraints. So that's really what I want to do with today's presentation. And in particular, I guess there's three things I want to accomplish. First thing is I want to talk and think generally about the idea of doing more with less, what that means for us as researchers and how it relates to the mobile platform. The second thing I'd like to do today is challenge some conventional wisdom that might exist and about doing mobile research. And to do that, I'm going to share with you just some examples from traditional online work that I believe points to what is possible to do on the mobile platform. And when I'm done with that, I'd like to wrap up by showing you the results of a mobile study we did at TRC that I think demonstrates how we can do more with less strategic, quantitative market research on the mobile device. So that's what I want to do. As primary researchers, I think we're all pretty familiar with this general concept of having to accomplish more with less. Tighter budgets, more projects coming at us, less time to get things done. It's a pretty general concept, but increasingly the consumer is part of this more with less equation as well, right? They're on the go. They're still willing to give us feedback, thank goodness, but perhaps not always when we want them to or as much as we might like them to. And so that is what has, I think, pushed the industry to be thinking more about doing mobile work. And from my perspective, is mobile a way to do more with less? The answer generally, I think, is yes. We know and that it's a powerful way to get at populations that are hard to reach. It lets us gather data at times and in places that we couldn't do before. Lets us into situations, point of purchase, people's homes, etc. Of course, there's a trade-off. Generally speaking, we're looking for, it's better at kind of less information with higher frequency. But generally speaking, it's consistent with what consumers want to do and how they want to give us feedback, and I think will continue to be so as we move forward. But what I want us to remember as we think about using mobile for quantitative purposes is that the most interesting, the most value-generating work we do tends to be a little more complex. It requires more from us as researchers. It requires more from the respondent in terms of what we need them to do for us. I'm talking about things like conjoint, prioritization techniques, things that we can build what-if simulations around. All these things are a little more complex. And what I would like us to think about is how we need to account for this sort of work as we move into a world that is increasingly mobile. Because if we don't, my concern is that we can marginalize ourselves as researchers, quantitative researchers, with only doing lower involvement, lower value, short 5 to 10 question surveys that maybe they're nice profiling efforts, et cetera, but aren't really going to answer some of the strategic questions that our clients may have. Of course, I mentioned earlier the conventional wisdom that's forming around mobile market research, and despite despite the need to address strategic work, right now the focus has been on this short and sweet. consumer mobile-friendly surveys, 5 to 10 questions, keeping the response dynamics very simple, assuming the consumer is not going to have a lot of time and attention. And I really can't argue that these are bad things. They're very good things for any survey. But we also need to keep in mind that when we maximize the experience, the number of questions, the number of dynamics, we are necessarily doing so with a trade-off for information value. If we're asking fewer questions, we're not going to necessarily get as much strategic value out of the data. So the thing is, we don't need to do that. As researchers, we have multiple things, multiple tools at our disposal besides survey design in terms of the experience for the consumer. We can do appropriate study design. We have powerful, advanced estimation techniques at our disposal. And from my perspective, when those three things come together, appropriate design, advanced estimation, with consumer mobile-friendly surveys, that to me is doing more with less mobile market research in the best way possible. In a sense, what we need to do as researchers is what we often tell our clients, which is let's not maximize on any one of these areas, but let's optimize to come up with a survey solution that would really answer some strategic questions, but still fit within the mobile platform. And when we think like optimizers and not maximizers, that really is what allows us, in my view, to challenge some of the conventional wisdom that may exist out there. And I chose this statement in this picture as perhaps a good example of that conventional wisdom. Fairly common statement you can imagine a researcher saying, "You can't do advanced choice-based work on a handheld device. It just doesn't fit." But I think it's worthwhile thinking about why we do that sort of choice-based work in the first place. We do these advanced studies because we want to build better products and services. We want to understand consumer preferences and choices or in priorities to build those better products and services. And at a fundamental level, we think having them make some form of trade-off is superior to just getting a rating or even a simple ranking. The reason we hesitate to do them on mobile devices is not because there's something different about mobile consumer, that trade-offs are not superior or we don't want to know their preferences. It's really more practical reasons, right? We tend to think they require too many choices or that it's too difficult to fit the types of choices we want to present to people on a smaller screen. But I don't, I think we should be questioning these assumptions. If you think about the first one, too many choices is sort of a challenge of estimation, and the second one is more of a challenge of how we design the task in the first place, with an eye towards being user-friendly but also still getting powerful results. And what I want to do next is walk you through two online studies that we've done that I think address these challenges. The first one, the estimation challenge, another way to kind of state that is, what's the right number of choices that we need to show people before we feel we get good enough data to make decisions? And to illustrate this challenge, I picked a case study, a project we did to look at preferences for HD televisions. It was a fairly conventional conjoint study, 7 different attributes, and showed people 3 product profiles per choice task with a none option. And of course also, we ended up with a task of a size of 13 different choice tasks were given. And this was, again, administered online, worked very well. And before I switch to the next slide, I guess a note that there's lots of different ways, of course, to determine when you have good conjoint results. Some of those are statistical, some of those are more about actionability, of course. But one common, more numeric or statistical way to think about it is hit rate, which is how well can we predict any individual's choices, and error, which is how often are we wrong at kind of estimating the choices that a group would make. So both of those things, we want to maximize hit rate, or we want to increase hit rate and minimize the error. And as we look at the results from the study, we see that on the right of this chart, we see what we do, what we get when we estimate make predictions based on all 13 cards, right? We get a maximum hit rate, 68% of the time we're predicting correctly at a very low level of error. So that's great. In a conventional study, that's probably what we would do. But if you look at this chart all the way to the left, because of the estimation techniques we have available, we can make our predictions with assuming we were using far fewer choices. And in fact, if we use just 3 choices, we still do a pretty good job of predicting what people would select. And when we get into the area of 6 or 9 different cards, you see we do almost as well as we do with 13. So to me, this is nothing necessarily new. It's just a way, as researchers, we don't often look at the data. We have the luxury in the online setting of giving people 13 choice tasks and estimating by those 13 choice tasks, and we don't often think, well, did we need to give 13? Could we have done almost as well with 6 or 9, something fewer? That becomes increasingly important in the mobile space where we may not have the luxury of giving all those choices, and perhaps we don't need to. The other side of the coin is a design challenge. Can we simplify the choices we provide people so that it fits better or works better on a small screen? And for this, I wanted to use a study we did among mobile subscribers. It was about stemming attrition, right? When subscribers were arriving at the end of their contracts, this client was very concerned with the best way to retain those customers and wanted to provide them with a series of offers to see whether or not, which would be the best one to optimize retention on their end. It was another conjoint study with 9 different attributes, a nice robust sample. The big twist here was that rather than doing let's say a traditional discrete choice with three or 4 product profiles and a none, we turned the choice into a starker choice, a take it or leave it sort of choice, right? So what we did was showed people one particular offer, and we basically asked them, would you take it or not? And we're very interested in seeing how this would, what kind of results it would produce. We were confident it would produce pretty good results, and in fact it did. Here are the results. You can see, again, a very strong hit rate. I mean, 89% is very high. Of course, it was just sort of a yes or no prediction we were making, so it was, the bar was a little higher. But we did very well in terms of hit rate with very little error. And what this demonstrated to us is, again, this idea that perhaps the choice itself that we present to consumers doesn't need to be as complex. It's still a discrete choice, yes or no, right? You take it or leave it. It's not a ranking or a rating, but it's different from putting 3 profiles in front of people, and we get very good results, and I can tell you very actionable results for our clients. So when we bring back our skeptical gentleman, perhaps he's not so skeptical anymore, right? Maybe we can do this sort of work using fewer tasks, and maybe the choices themselves could be simplified. Maybe I can begin to see a world where we can do conjoint and these more complex studies on mobile devices. So that's great. I mean, I don't think we're there fully today. I think there's still some development work that needs to be done in terms of how we present choices and rendering and things like that. So we may or may not be at the point where we can do complex conjoints on a mobile. I think we're getting there. But it certainly opens the door to thinking about doing more strategic work and doing some of these advanced techniques that go beyond 5 to 10 questions on the mobile device. I think, in particular, a great place to start is this idea of tournament-style prioritization. Now, I'm not sure how familiar people are with tournament-style approaches out there in the audience. Generally speaking, if you think of a MaxDiff, which takes people through a series of choice sets and presents certain attributes over and over again in a pre-designed way, that has certainly some benefits, but is tricky when you have long lists of features. Tournament-style approaches are a little more efficient in that they provide people with initial sets of attributes, but then only really move the winners forward in the tournament, and then have reassemble choice tasks based on the ones that are left, and have people pick from those, and it keeps winnowing the field. They're good for online when you have lots of features or attributes or messages you want to test, and because they're good, because of the way they work, I think they're great for the mobile platform. If you think about it, It's sort of a way of kind of illustrating more with less mobile market research in the best way. It requires some thoughtful design. It relies upon advanced estimation techniques to come up with the utilities and the results, but it also still provides a very user-friendly experience because it requires fewer questions and more relevant questions. Think about for a second going to the movie. You know, how do you decide where to go, right? What to see? It's an everyday prioritization problem, and it's something we wanted to tackle with a study of our own to test out how well a tournament-style prioritization approach would work in a mobile setting. So the first thing is think about all the different reasons you could have for choosing a movie in a movie theater. Of course, there's so many. We stopped ourselves at 18. It could have been much more, which, you know, in a MaxDiff, using a MaxDiff technique would have required approximately 14 different choice sets. Even more if that list had increased beyond 18. That's sometimes trouble in the online world. I mean, people will do it, but that doesn't mean they're doing it well. Using a tournament-style approach, we can reduce those 14 choices down to 9, and in our view, 9 more relevant choices that they had to make because they're based on what they've already told us they prefer. To us, that was definitely more mobile appropriate. We tested this in a study, and here are the details of that study. 400 adults, a questionnaire that was a little longer than the traditional short and sweet, 20 questions, 6 to 7 minutes, let's say. We made sure that every consumer accessed and completed the survey using a mobile device, which was important, obviously, to figuring out how well this would work on mobile. And so the main task at hand was for respondents to review different choice sets and in the process, by making choices, essentially prioritize the 18 different reasons why they go to the movies in the first place. As you can see in the picture on the right, the task itself was very simple. It was very easily formatted for both iPhones and Android devices, and it looked very much like this. So it's something that was very easy for people to assess and respond to, which was, of course, a benefit. And when we completed this study, we see that we get exactly what we're hoping for out of a prioritization study. First and foremost, we get a rank ordering. Across those 18, we're able to figure out the most important factors and the least important factors. So that's great. But that's something that we can accomplish any number of ways. The reason we do more advanced prioritization techniques is not just because we want the rank ordering. We also want the distance between ranks. We want the ability to segment those results by different subgroups and perhaps do our own needs-based segmentation if possible. And using a tournament-style approach, we get that, right? So it's not just a simple rank ordering. We get the distance between ranks. As you can see here, the green dots are the rank ordering of factors using from the mobile data, and the red dots are we happen to do the study in a traditional online setting as well. As you can see, they matched up very well. So not only were we able to get the rank orders, the distance between ranks, the power to cut these data or segment these data any way we wanted, but they also was very comforting to know that the results we got using only the mobile platform were very much in line with what we would have gotten using a traditional online technique. So to sum up, that's the end of my tour, the end of the things I was hoping to accomplish. And, if I leave you with any thoughts, it's these on this page right now, which is, more with less mobile research, in my view, needs to be a little beyond short and sweet. It needs to be more than fast and cheap. We shouldn't be marginalizing ourselves as custom quantitative researchers. If we only do 5 to 10 question surveys, if we say that's all it can do, then that's all we'll ever be asked to do, and eventually we'll marginalize ourselves. We have to remember as researchers we definitely have more tools in our belt than just programming and formatting. We have design, we have estimation. We need to take full advantage of those, be really creative to accomplish some of these more complex studies. It's certainly relevant right now, not just because Consumers are increasingly mobile and willing to do surveys mobily, but you think about point of purchase studies or recall issues, et cetera. Doing advanced mobile research, I think, has relevance. And more generally, I think that the idea of doing more with less on the mobile platform should help us as researchers across all methodologies, because once we figure out how we can do very powerful, very complex studies on the small screen, if that involves fewer choices or simpler choices and we still get really good results, then I think we should be asking ourselves the question, why wouldn't we apply those same shorter, simpler approaches across online and other ways we do research? Because why do a 15-minute or a highly complex survey if we don't need to? So that's all I have for today. I leave you with the charge to be an optimizer, not a maximizer, when you think about mobile research, mobile quantitative research. And I look forward to any questions you guys may have. Thanks.